to get it, brother Eric, to give him a hand. You hear lie? That is lie. Lie? You hear lie?
Teacher Pussy say if you tell a lie, you go into hell as soon as you die.
Why, sir? Check it out. Liar the lion, he laughed till he sweat. He said, Mr. Depot, ain't said nothing yet.
Hi folks, good evening and thank you so much for joining me this evening. Hi Barbara, hi Marsha, hi Sharon, hi Nicole, hi Jamelia, hi Dee, hi Craig, morning, hi Javon. What a week it has been. So the last time we would have been here was Sunday evening, and on Sunday evening that's when we would have had the that's when we would have had the interview, and between then and now everything turned all mass because we have had a week of lies, half-truths, innuendos, all kinds of things taking place, and I felt that it was time to talk properly and directly to the Sagba Report and all of the bacchanals surrounding the Sabga Report. So, as you would have known, this report was done, and it was done 25 years ago, quarter a century. It has only really been aired in the public domain this year, 2022. And we have looked at the members of the United National Congress, the government under which the report would have been done, spend a lot of time in the last week or so gaslighting, deflecting, ad hominem attacks because my name jumping up in the public domain, deceased MP Ken Valley's name is jumping up in the public domain, the Chief Justice's name is jumping up in the public domain, and I see the trolls are already here. Hi Seema, how you doing? Nice to see you. So I want the trolls to come on, and I want the trolls to spend quite some time building the live and boosting my numbers this evening, because I have plenty to say about the United National Congress. So the first thing I'm going to say, the first salvo I'm going to start off with is every single last one of the persons on the opposition side who has said that they didn't know anything about the report, they had nothing to do with the report. I'm telling you now, everybody has lied. And me ain't coming out and saying people lie just so. I come into all you with documents. So let we start. Let we jump into the thing, and let we jump into the thing properly. Yes, thank you, Johnny Arian. I hear my name get called on the news, all kind of thing this week. So let's start with where this entire thing started. So, for you so, jump up so, put myself up in the corner so. Folks, February 2022. The very first time I heard anything about the Sabga Report was when Trinidad Guardian published this story. And it says, Robert Sabga breaks his silence on Children's Home Report. Wards groomed for politicians and businessmen. And you got into the story, and the story said a lot but said nothing. So Robert Sabga, in this article on February 20th, went about describing a very weird and ambiguous situation. How he had to meet Manohar Ramsaran in the dead of night, hand him a report from one car trunk to the next car trunk, that nobody could talk about the report. Everybody was under strict vows of silence, all kinds of things. And he consistently talked about a pedophile ring in the newspaper article. Consistently, and all week long, as he has tried to defend himself, he has talked about this pedophile ring. And I will tell you, the 170 pages of the document that I went through, because I've seen a document that has other things added to it, appendix and stuff. In that 170 pages, all that the task force outlines are abuses specific to homes. Whether it's state homes or private homes, that's what it outlines. At no point in time in that report that his name is attached to. And I want you to understand this. Robert Sabga signed off on a report. And the report that he signed off on, that I think has been leaked into the public domain, because between last night and this morning, several persons sent me a PDF file of the Sabga report. And that PDF file resembles the file that I saw. It is... it doesn't have all of the attachments and all of the appendices that I would have seen, but it is mostly what I would have seen and read. And so you are in a position, those of you that have gotten the PDF, and it's circulating all over the place, you are in a position to be able to read it, and you will see that Robert Sabga, based on that Sabga report, has been lying to us all week long. And I'm saying it in big, Robert. Based on the 1997 version of the Sabga report that I saw, based on the version that was eventually sent before cabinet, and I have seen the version that was sent before cabinet, and I'm saying it here plain, in 1998, it was before the cabinet. And you know how I know it was before the cabinet? Because there was a Prime Minister's note attached to it, but I go show you that just now. So Robert comes out February 2022. Now there are a couple of things that we need to be aware of. Robert Sabga, after having done that task force report, became the High Commissioner to Canada under the Basdeo Panday regime. Based on what we know, how we understand the politics here does work, Robert Sabga, if he was appointed as a high commissioner during that time period, invariably is a friend of or is aligned with the United National Congress. So I think it's safe to say he's a friend of the UNC. So here is this man commissioned to do a report, commissioned in 1996 thereabouts, asked to do the report, the report is submitted in 1997 to They do the investigations and they submit their findings in 1997, and then the report eventually makes its way before the cabinet in March of 1998. So all of that happens. He becomes the High Commissioner to Canada, and now 25 years after having done that, Robert opens up his mouth. And so when I saw this story, I was curious. I was curious for a number of reasons. I had never heard about the Sabga report, but eventually when I did get my hands on it and I started reading it, there were things about the report that seemed familiar. And of course, because those things seemed familiar, eventually I started doing my digging. And let me flip back here. This popped up, and that's when I remembered, yes, this was a thing. This happened. So back then, in 1997, December 1997, the TNT Mirror did a story about the task force report. And again, for those of you who frequent my page on Newsauce and would have been able to see this, you would have you would have seen that this newspaper report focused on much the same things that I talked about, abuses at the homes. Now there are 4 large state homes, and then there are a number of other smaller private homes. And the report focused on what was going on in those homes, about 27 of the homes. And they identify the various homes, talk about how much money each home is getting, talk about the conditions at the homes, talk about all of the things that they found and needed to see change, that sort of thing. That is what takes place in the report. I, with my goodly self, get my hands on the report, or manage to get my hands on part of the report. put out parts of the report for you all to see, for you all to be aware, and then everything turn en masse. So there are a couple other things that we need to take note of, and these are some of them. When Robert did his thing in February, shortly thereafter, in late April, the government would have tabled the Judith Jones report. Ayanna Webster Roy, who is the minister in the office of the Prime Minister handling gender affairs and children's affairs, she would have tabled a report in the Parliament. And when that report was tabled in the Parliament, the first thing that Kamla Prasad Bissessa did, not too long after it was tabled, was to do a Mother's Day greeting. And when she did her Mother's Day greeting to the population, the first thing that she did in her Mother's Day greeting wasn't just to greet mothers and, tell them Happy Mother's Day and big them up, but it was to actually reference the Judith Jones report, the Justice Jones report, and the fact that it took 5 months for the government to release the report into the public domain. I thought that was a bit of hypocrisy, because of course by that time I had gotten my hands on the Sabga report, and I got my hands on the Sabga report, and by then I had already started asking, because I asked a range of persons. I sent messages to government ministers, I sent messages to the Parliament, I sent messages to the librarians at the UWI, because there is a section of the library called West Indiana, and West Indiana would of course have all of these important documents that are related to Trinidad and Tobago's history and legal system and legislation. So I started asking, does anybody have this report? Where is this report? I would like to see the report. And the reason I wanted to see the report obviously had to do with the allegations that were made by Robert Sabga. When you come out and you say that you led a task force, and the task force stumbled upon information that pointed to orphans or children who were put in the care of the state being groomed for politicians and businessmen, that is a huge accusation. And it's a huge accusation for a number of reasons. So I want you all to put aside your political feelings right now and bear a couple things in mind. Based on that report, and this is a report that would have been written by him, Robert Sabga, based on that report, at least 40 boys, 40 young men under the age of 18 would have been raped. Note I said at least. So at a minimum, you did a report, and based on that report, you discovered that at least 40 young men were raped. That's a criminal report. You have gathered evidence that points to criminal activity. Now, why would you, having gathered evidence that pointed to criminal activity, why would you not act on it? So, in reading it, and I'm there thinking to myself, well, okay, 40 boys, a minimum of 40 boys, because that's the 40 we know about. And then there is another home, right? There's a Hindu orphanage that had a number of children that were also raped by a 16-year-old boy who was on the compound, and they never sent the boy to YTC. So you have 40 plus, like close to 50 children in that report that you have identified as having been raped, right? So I want all to grasp this. Robert Sabga, who all week long has positioned himself as a pillar of society, a paragon of virtue, somebody who fighting for justice in this country, he is aware that 40 plus children were raped in the state home system, and he didn't do anything about it. He compiled his report, he submit a report, and then after that, 25 years later, you are breaking your silence. But when you're breaking your silence, you are not giving details. Now, let me ask all of this. If you do a report, if you gathered information, if you gathered hard evidence, right? Witness testimony. So you spoke to the children, or you spoke to the adults at the home, and the children and the adults at the home are there telling you this is what has happened to me, or the adults are telling you this is what has happened to the children. You have eyewitness testimony. So you have eyewitness testimony, you have a report that you would have submitted to your line minister, and you come this week and to cover your ass because somebody point out that you sit down on a report for 25 years and did nothing about it. To cover your ass, you start to talk about a dead man, because you know you can't be sued for defamation if the person is dead, and you start to make allusions and allegations to a Chief Justice. Why? You ain't calling the Chief Justice name, but you know that the majority of the society views the Chief Justice's sexual orientation in a particular way. You are also aware that ours is a society where we equate homosexuality with pedophilia, which is not exactly the same thing at all. You can be a homosexual and not be a pedophile. So because you know that people think or people suspect the CJ is of a different orientation, you then decide that you're going to throw talk out into the public domain because you know that we are a population that thrives on prejudice and bigotry. So here you have the perfect situation in your mind, Robert Sabga, to be able to save your tail. You have decided that you are going to gaslight the population, and you are going to deflect in a different direction, and you are going to go with ad hominem attacks. The other interesting thing is the fact that they look to twist facts and twist information. The Sabga Report happens in 1997. That whole Akiel Chambers issue that everybody chooses to jump on and beat as a dead horse this week, that whole Akiel Chambers situation is a situation that occurred in 1998. But we're going to get to Akiel Chambers just now. I ain't jumping off Robert Sabga just yet. So Robert Sabga of the Sabga clan, and you all know the warm fuzzy feelings I have towards the Sabga clan. Robert Sabga of the Sabga clan, that paragon of virtue, that pillar of society, sits on a report and comes out 25 years later and talks about the report in vague terms. And he's talking about the report in vague terms because this piece of shit wants people to start saying, well, the PNM have pedophiles. The PNM have people that sexually abusing children. That was the whole point of this February 20th, 2022 story. It was to generate rumors about a pedophile ring and a sex trafficking ring specific to a particular political party. But it blew up in his face because after you put out the story and after Kamla makes she comment and after the report land up in my hand, that is when I realized, but nobody do anything with this report for 25 years. You all were aware that almost 50 children, right? Somewhere around 50 children would have been raped, and you did nothing. So let's get into a couple things here. I want to make sure I do this properly. So you will notice this evening that most of my graphics were done by my graphic artist, and each picture has a different nun. So you'll have Marsha Lorraine Walker there as a staple, and I have Marsha as a staple because Marsha spent the entire week beating him out all over social media, calling Akiel Chambers' name, calling Ken Valley name, alluding to the Chief Justice. It's not her alone, because Eve George as well. And there are a couple things that I wanted to say here. So let me pause for a minute and say what it is I need to say. If and when the United National Congress looks to rebrand itself, it needs to move away from the logo of the rising sun and perhaps just find a photograph of any black man and make that your party symbol. And I'm going to tell you why I'm saying that. Whenever the UNC is in trouble, the first thing they look to do is demonize a black man. Any black man will do. It don't really matter to them which black man. Just once the person could be demonized, once you could find something about the person to whip up their support base around, you will do that. So this week, the UNC went after Ken Valley. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm trying to defend or protect anybody's reputation here, because I'm not. What I am looking at is they refused to deal with the issue at hand. The issue in the public domain is here is a report. This report was done a quarter of a century ago. Every single person that was abused a quarter of a century ago are big men and women now, are adults now. So if it was a 1-year-old baby that was sexually abused 25 years ago, that person is 25 years old now. And they would have done nothing about it. So here you go. You call Ken Valley name because you know Ken not here to defend himself. You allude to the CJ and you understand only too well that because the Chief Justice is in the position that he is in as the head of the judiciary, and also because you ain't actually calling his name, the chances of him speaking out in his personal capacity or even in an official capacity are slim to non-existent. So you're doing the most and you're running up and down and you're calling people name in your mouth. And when you find that ain't enough, you resort to dredging up yet another dead black male. So you dredge up Akiel Chambers' name and you run Akiel Chambers' name all over social media. You run the story all over social media, but you cherry pick the story. And I'm going to talk about the cherry picking of this story. So let me get into a particular clip. This is an important clip that I need to play. Let me find it. And oh wait, just now. Did I leave it? Aha.
Point in time.
Right. Let's play this clip.
It was a UNC government. Can you say whether or not any of those persons that were named were part of the UNC government?
I will categorically tell you no. None. You have to remember the UNC had been in office a little over a year. What we ran into was something that was already well established and endemic.
So are you saying that we could assume that they were active members of the PNM government or officials, active members of that party who were part
I
of
neither
that title
confirm,
in the
I
article?
neither confirm nor deny.
You're not gonna-
So Robert Sabga comes, jumps on to kick out the PNM live, and of course they get 2 tokens to sit down and talk foolishness and ask questions. Robert is asked a direct question. Any members of the PNM involved in the sex and pedophile ring? Now, Robert, February 20th, you put out a story. And in the story, you said boldly that young people were being groomed for politicians and businessmen. in this interview, you are saying that the UNC was a young government, and that's not a lie. They would have come into government in December of 1995. Their first year in government would have been 1996. Then 1997 would have been their second year. You would have been commissioned then to do the report, and you would have done your report then. Nobody is saying that the abuses at these homes started under the UNC. Nobody is saying that at all. As a matter of fact, we know that the abuses that have taken place at these homes have gone on for decades, and the abuses would have started all the way back when the home started in the 1800s. It ain't have nothing new or strange about that. Reprehensible and disgusting, yes, but new and strange, no. So at no point in time is anybody claiming that what would have occurred, what would have taken place, is something that is specific to the UNC by way of the abuse of children. Nobody is saying that. What we're saying is, you all did a report. You all found things. You all had information. What did you do with it?
Confirm or deny, okay. And you know the
I
the
neither
title of that
confirm nor
article?
They say that time is longer than twine.
Yeah.
So Robert spends the rest of this interview speaking in riddles. That's what he does for the entire interview. A set of riddles. I can neither confirm nor deny, trying to make himself sound mysterious and cryptic. They say time longer than twine. And you know what, Robert? You ain't lie. Time longer than twine. Because look how this thing come and catch up with you.
Robert?
One of the key individuals has now shuffled off his mortal coil. He's gone. But one of the other key individuals still holds a very high position.
Right, so you hear this. One of the key individuals has shuffled off this mortal coil. That's his allusion there to Ken Valley. And then one of the other key individuals is a senior official, right? And of course, given the language used, let me play it again.
Position. The best clue, I can't speak to this.
I want to play it again properly.
Very high position. The pulled off his mortal coil. He's gone. But one of the other key individuals still holds a very high position. The best.
So all of this is innuendo. All of it. No names are being called. They're just alluding to things because of course everybody is aware that this would be defamatory. That this has courthouse in it, right? And so he continues to talk about the Akiel Chambers case as if he had anything to do with the Akiel Chambers investigation. Audience, I want you to remember something. His report, his investigation happened in 1997. Akiel Chambers' murder occurred in 1998, in May 1998 to be specific. So let me let this interview end, and then we're going to go into the Akiel Chambers aspect of things.
Clue. I can't speak to this. I cannot call names. But if you recall the story of the young boy who was buggered and who was drowned in a pool.
Akiel Chambers.
I didn't say anything. It's these two.
I-
Earl and
No, Akiel Chambers.
The autopsy report on that boy went the same way as our report, because the DNA of two of these individuals were found in his body, in his anus at the time.
Now you see that? That right there? I was going to lego one pre-action protocol letter in Robert Sabga ass. Because Robert Sabga comes out and he says the DNA of both of these individuals, one who has died, the other one who he is alluding to, and everybody is clear about who he's alluding to, both their DNA was found in Akiel Chambers' anus. So let us switch now and go to this whole Akiel Chambers scenario. Now, the Akiel Chambers issue is the red herring that the UNC would have thrown up this week, because they know that it looks very bad that they sat on a 25-year report. A whole 25 years passed. And don't worry, I'm coming to Diana Mahabir-Wyatt in a little bit, because I have 2 or 3 things to say about the former goodly senator. This week is a week where I watch plenty of these people who feel them is paragons of virtue, and I said to myself, but me can't respect all you. Me can't respect all you at all. So let's get into the Akiel Chambers side of things. Where's that? Where do I have it? Right. So, this week, right, I'm gonna clear it so you could actually, can you see it when it's like that? I just want to dip it a little bit so you see Evie George, right? This on Evie George page. So 3 days ago, Eve George puts up this post. And like I said, it had nothing the UNC like better than finding a male, a black male, especially if it's a dead black male, to use to piggyback on to be able to rile up the supporters to be able to get mileage, right? So they went and they went back into the archives and dug up this story and used this story as a red herring. Basically to say, this boy died and it's PNM people who killed the boy. That's the whole gist of their argument this week. So, folks, for the sake of logic, and let me flip this a little bit because I want to ask all of this question. Akiel Chambers would have been murdered in 1998. Who was in government in 1998? I want all of you to stop and study all your head good. Who was in charge of the government in 1998? Now imagine you in a situation where you have this report, this murder has taken place. According to the head of the task force that was responsible for the report, all you know, all you had the evidence, all you had the DNA evidence. According to Robert Sabga just now, they had the DNA evidence of these 2 PNM persons, and all you was in government and did nothing. I want all you to pause and think about that, you know. The UNC is in power. So Prime Minister, UNC. Commissioner of Police is somebody that they would be able to interact with. The Prime Minister would also be the chair of the National Security Council. The Minister of National Security would be somebody who is UNC, right? All your running things. And according to this task force member, all you have all that information and did nothing. Absolutely nothing. The Attorney General, UNC. And you all did nothing. Minister of Legal Affairs, UNC. And you did nothing. And of course, tied up in that red herring is a huge lie. And let me tell you what the lie is. DNA. Because at that point in time, we were not yet doing DNA testing. We weren't doing DNA testing. We were not gathering samples for the purpose of DNA testing. So now, let's go into what the pathologist had to say. And the excerpts that I'm going to show you come from, I'm pulling up the story so that you can see the story properly. Right. The excerpts that I'm going to read out for you are from this story. May 24th, 2018. Right? So May 24th, 2018. I want all you, when the live finish, go and read it for yourself. Because all week this week, Eve and Marsha cherry-picked the details of the forensic report. All week long, they cherry-picked the details from the forensic report. So I am now going to read the full forensic report for you. And so that way, when I say the full forensic report, I'm going to read excerpts from the forensic report so that you're going to understand this whole DNA red herring story that the UNC ran with this week. So here we go. This is in reference to Akiel's body. So this is what one of the forensic pathologists was saying. He said, the anus was patulous and the anal canal was very lax. I concluded from the findings that the child had been subjected over a long period to repeated sexual intercourse. I want to move it right. I cannot say when was the last time there was sexual intercourse. I didn't take any swabs from the anal canal to look for any sperm. I'm going to repeat that. I cannot say when was the last time there was sexual intercourse. I didn't take any swabs from the anal canal to look for any sperm. All you hear that? Whole week this week, Robert Sabga, he went on Gael, he went on Kick Out the PNM, anywhere that open. If you open your fridge right now, you're going to see Robert Sabga sit down in your fridge talking to you. Anywhere. He was all over the place saying that the DNA from 2 persons was found in the young man. And when you look back at this story, one of the major heartbreaking aspects of this story was how badly the evidence collection for this case was. It was poorly done. It was one of the things that had everybody angry. Everybody was up in their fields because they was like, so wait, they didn't collect samples, they didn't test, they didn't ship the samples to somewhere else, to another part of the world for it to be tested. So the forensic pathologist says, I didn't take any swabs. I did not feel the intercourse was related directly to the cause of death. You believe? I mean, that's what the pathologist was saying. The body had bathing trunks but no underwear, as PC husbands took away an article of underwear. So you had a situation where undergarments were missing, right? A police officer took away the undergarments. All of those things were there in the public domain as information that had us upset. So imagine you have Robert Sabga coming all of these years later, 25 years later, well in this case it would be 24 years later, to say that DNA from those 2 persons were found in the young man, when the major problem was no swabbing was done properly, right? There was inadequate evidence and there was certainly no DNA testing. And the article goes on to tell you the second autopsy was performed on the 28th of May. So Akiel, if I'm not mistaken, was found dead on the 23rd of May. The first autopsy took place on the 25th of May, and then the second autopsy was performed on the 28th of May. So the second autopsy was performed on May 28th by Hugh Von Devines, who noted that samples were taken from microscopic examination and swabs were taken of oral and anal cavities for microscopic examination as well. These samples that were taken by Hugh Von Devines were destroyed after 2 years. So there was never any proper examination of DNA evidence or information. And the reason I am saying all of this is not to defend or protect anybody, but to get you to understand the extent of the lie that Robert Sabga perpetuated on the population of Trinidad and Tobago this week, to deflect from the fact that he sat on a report about child abuse. He was the head of a task force, and that task force would have uncovered the fact that at least 40 young males and other children, so somewhere around 50, and that 50 would be a combination of boys and girls, were raped. Me start to talk about the physical abuse yet, you know. I talking about 40 to 50 young children, male and female, who were raped. The task force was aware of it, and they were aware that the rape that was taking place was from people who were positioned at the homes. In one instant, 40 young boys are said to have been raped by somebody who was a caregiver at the home. In the case of the other children at the Hindu orphanage, it would have been a 16-year-old boy positioned there with the rest of the children, and he was raping the children. One child, if I remember from the report correctly, was about 9 years old. And they'd never moved the child from the home to YTC. The children received no medical treatment or psychological treatment. There was nothing in that report about grooming anybody for politicians and businessmen. Robert come and say what it is he say, because he was looking to do things for likes. He was looking to make waves with a story and get shares and all of a sudden be prominent in the public domain. He stand up with a shovel trying to dig hole for other people, and then he fall down in the hole for himself. But let me get back on course. And I want to get back on course with, there's a particular issue, a particular person I want to take a look at here. Well, a series of persons. So this is Manohar Ramsaran. And Manohar really let me down this week. And he really let me down this week for a number of reasons. Manohar Ramsaran is somebody that I had respect for up until this week. He grew up in central Trinidad, played cricket with many of my relatives. I know him to be a personable person, very kind-hearted. I remember one night late, I was in Piarco. This is when it was the old airport, and I needed a lift back home. And Manohar was then MP for, I think, Shogunas West, offered me a lift home as a government minister. He didn't know me from Adam. He just knew here was this girl leaving the airport after having covered a story, and she needed a lift home, and he offered me a lift home. So imagine this week, this whole thing blow up. Everybody wants to know, well, how this report happened, and all they sit down on it and all they ain't do nothing. And Manohar and all. Before you just come out and talk the truth, you're all over the place, but you ain't know nothing about it. You're not sure. Then it was tabled in Parliament. It was never tabled in Parliament. It never got to the Parliament, and I am eventually going to show you what I mean. All right. So Manohar is somebody, he real disappoint me this week. And I feel he needs to be held accountable. He have questions to answer. After you get a report like that, what you do with it? Information like that comes to you. And yes, you take it to the cabinet, and the cabinet take it to the Finance and General Purpose Committee. But what about the criminal aspects of the report? You would have received information that pointed to crimes having taken place. Even if at that point in time you all felt it was all right to beat children and cuss children, the way in which the report points to verbal and physical abuse, all you really and truly thought it was okay to be having sex with little children so and do nothing about it? Nah, man, Manohar. Better than that. Better than that. So that's Manohar Ramsaran. Then, now I want to jump on Kamla just yet. There's Robert. I will come back to Kamla just now. Barry Padarat. Barry decided he had to come out and defend Mousy. He had to come out and defend Kamla. And stands up in the Parliament and lies a big lie. Stand up in the Parliament this week and say, according to a Hansard report from 2006, the report was tabled. Barry can't tell we what year and month the report was tabled, who tabled the report, nothing of the sort. And all that part of the Hansard tells you is that Manohar Ramsaran got up and referenced the report and said that he was aware of the report. It does not indicate or establish at all that the report was tabled. And you know why? That's because the report was never tabled. Not never was it tabled. And the thing is, a task force report like that should have been made available to the public, but it was never made available to the public. A report like that should have been made available to the TTPS, for the TTPS to investigate the crimes at those homes. But that didn't happen. Then, and the thing is, after Barry get up and say what is he had to say, real people fight me down when I come out and I say he lying. The next day, who boy of all people, Anna Ramdas go come out. Imagine that. I say water more than flour when is Anna Ramdas who come in to say, well, the report was not tabled. So the report was never laid in Parliament. Never laid in Parliament. And in a little bit I'm going to tell you what went on with the report. But it was never laid in Parliament. And now we have the goodly independent senator. Of all of the people to have disappointed me this week, she had to take the prize. She had to take the prize for having disappointed me this week. Because the former independent senator, Diana Mahabir-Wyatt, has been a champion, publicly been a champion for children's issues since I know myself. I come up as a youngster constantly hearing Diana Mahabir-Wyatt's name. I come up constantly hearing about Diana Mahabir-Wyatt and children's issues. So I'm going to let all in on a couple of things. Number one, Diana was a member of the task force. Everybody know that. Diana sit on that task force. Diana aware of all of the information that was in that report. And Diana is saying not one ass for 25 years. Diana went on to start an NGO. I think Childline was the NGO. Diana, back in 2014, was the head of the Children's Task Force. Because remember, under Kamala, they set up a task force. She was the head of the Children's Task Force. And the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, that's what it's called now. It had a different name then. But the line ministry that was dealing up with children's issues and children's affairs, back then asked Diana for a copy of the report. Let me repeat that. Back in 2014, Diana Mahabir-Wyatt was the head of the Children's Task Force. The task force was given the responsibility, they had the responsibility of bringing into fruition things like the Children's Authority and, of course, to get the Children's Act amended and passed. Diana Mahabir-Wyatt was asked then, and she was asked again recently with the whole Justice Judith Jones report. She was asked whether or not she has a copy of this 1997 task force report, and she did not produce the report for anybody. So imagine my shock this week when Diana comes out in public and says, look, here, I have a copy of the report. And I've had a copy of the report. Let's know it. Give me a second. Oops. I don't want to drop this. Oops. Sorry about that. Sit down. Big picture on the Newsday. I have a copy of the report. And I'm willing to pass on my copy of the report to the government via an attorney. So when I see that, I say to myself, but why you need to do this via an attorney? Why you can't just make a photocopy of the report and send the report in to whichever ministerial agencies or state agencies or government agencies need to see the report? Because the Judith Jones Commission, the commission led by Justice Jones, wanted a copy of the report, not to make a bacchanal, you know. They wanted a copy of the report to see what were the findings 25 years ago, to see what were the recommendations 25 years ago, and to be able to gauge what improvements had happened between 1997 to now. That's why they wanted the report. They wanted this report to be able to put it together with their 2021 report so that they would be able to show 1997, these were the findings, these were the recommendations, this is what has occurred since then. And all of the subsequent reports that would have occurred from 1997 to now. Because the Sabga report ain't the first report, and it certainly wasn't the last report. The Justice Jones report wasn't the first report since 1997. There were other reports in between. So the Justice Jones Task Force wanted this report to be able to build a narrative of continuity. And what I want all you to understand is this. Diana and them get paid to do this work, right? We tax dollars jump up and wind down the road in a mass band, pay them to do this work, and you sit down with this in your house. You sit down with it in your house. People asking you for the report. You leading task force back in 2014. You asked for the report because people want the information, and you're sitting on it and you're hiding it. So the question I start to ask myself is, why? Why they hiding it? And let me tell you why I asking myself this question. And it goes right back to the thing with, it goes right back to what Robert Sabga and they had to say. If you are aligned with the United National Congress, because it's whenever the UNC in power, you will see Diana getting, she's at the forefront of things. And well, Robert Sabga at the forefront of things. So if you are aligned with a particular political party, and all you find information like this about the People's National Movement, why wouldn't you put that information out in the public domain? Because strategically thinking, if you're moving strategically, right? So all you walk with me here. Imagine your enemy. You have an enemy. You have a political enemy, right? In this particular instance, is your political enemy. You sit down with this kind of information about your political enemy, and you wouldn't put it out in the public domain to sink the party? Why not? Why would you hide the information? And you need to grasp something here. The United National Congress, when it was in government from 1995 to 2000, managed to put Dole Chedi in prison and get him hung. Right? He was hanged. And Dole, to the best of my understanding, was down as somebody was a financier of the United National Congress. Right? That's what I was told back then. So imagine they could find a way to be able to arrest, convict, and hang Dole Chedi and his gang while they were in government from 1995 to 2000. And your biggest enemy, right? Your political foe, the People's National Movement, you will have information that could sink them based on what Robert Sabga have to say. You have all this information in a report that pointing to a sex ring, a pedophile sex ring, and you ain't put the information in the public domain? You ain't put it out there that these are who the pedophiles are in the People's National Movement, and this is how the sex ring operated, and this is how they groom, and this is how. You ain't put none of that out in the public domain? Because I'm putting it to you. When you sit down and you read this report, the report does not chronicle anything about a sex ring. So now I want to know where the sex ring talk from. Where the sex ring talk come out from. And how, if you had all of this information about a pedophile sex ring in the People's National Movement for 25 years, how you ain't say nothing about it? You ain't use it in 2000. You ain't use it in 2001. You ain't use it in 2002. I want you to understand. 2000 was an election year. 2001 was an election year. 2002 was an election year. 2007 was an election year. 2010 was an election year. 2015 was an election year. 2020 was an election year. Count with me. 7 elections pass. And the United National Congress sit down on a report that they claim pointing to a pedophile sex ring that the PNM responsible for, and only ain't put it out in the public domain? Why? Because if I sitting down on information about my enemy that go sink my enemy and make sure he dogs dead, bet your bottom dollar I come in and sit down here and release them files for all you know. Right? Bet your bottom dollar I come in here and talk the things, and it's hot facts and bats going and be running on this live. So explain to me how the UNC could have this alleged sex ring information for 25 years and never once use it. Up to now, Friday the 20th of May, what's the time? 7:58 p.m. Up to now, we have no information about how exactly the sex ring working. All we hearing is Robert Sabga alluding to Ken Valley and alluding to the Chief Justice. That's all. And Marsha and Eve George and all of them. All they're doing is alluding, but nobody ain't busting no mark. I as a woman just come here and sit down with documents and bust mark. Last week I bust mark with the Sabga Report. And now I'm going to bust a next mark. So let me show all you. Let me let all you know that the report from the task force make it all the way up to the Prime Minister. So Basdeo Pandey, where my boy Baz boy? Basdeo Pandey, Baz, how you gonna do me this boy? Baz, how you gonna do me this? Baz, you know it hurt my heart to sit down and watch this cabinet minute boy, and know that it's from the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister at that point in time could have only been you, Baz. Could have only been you. So let me show all of the documents so you will know I wasn't lying, because all you know me. I as a woman just like to make sure I line up my ducks and ducklings before I... So there we go. So here we go. Cabinet minute. Cabinet Minute number 587 of March 12th, 1998. The UNC government in 1998, the Cabinet of the UNC government in 1998, March 12th, would have looked at the task force to review the operations of children's homes and institutions in Trinidad and Tobago. The whole cabinet. The whole cabinet. So it says here, a Prime Minister's note, together with the comments of the Minister of Social Development, so Manohar Ramsaran as well. So Manohar see the report, the Prime Minister see the report, and the recommendations of the Finance and General Purposes Committee was considered. So the Prime Minister see the report, the Line Minister see the report, the Finance and General Purposes Committee see the report, and the Cabinet see the report. So, tot moon, the whole world of the UNC government saw the report and then did nothing. I want you all to remember that. A minimum of 40 boys were raped, according to the Sabga Report of 1997. And the Prime Minister was aware, the Line Minister was aware, the Cabinet was aware, and they did nothing. The task force was aware, and they sit down on it for 25 years. So all you could say, all you wanted to say, and call me all kind of names, and spend whole week calling poor Akiel Chambers' name in all your mouth, and spend whole week demonizing the Chief Justice, because in all your prejudice, bigoted mind, once somebody has, or once you think somebody has a particular orientation, you automatically assume that that different orientation means that the person is a pervert or depraved. We have no idea what the CJ's orientation is, and we also must not assume that persons that have a different orientation are automatically perverts. But we are at the 8 o'clock hour, and at 8 o'clock I tend to wrap things up. But I want to leave all you with a little teaser. I want to leave all you with a little something. The next time I come back here to do a live, I have to spend some time talking about that whole plot to lynch the Chief Justice. Because 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019 was a time period in which the United National Congress, in opposition, spent a lot of time trying to get the entire population to lynch the Chief Justice, not on the basis of his performance as the head of our judiciary, but on the basis of our perception of his orientation. Now, all you know me, as a woman, just take my time and gather my information. And when I come back, the next time I come here and have a live with you all, we're going to have a little conversation, because there's some things I want all you to listen to. So I'm going to give all you a little teaser this evening. Just listen to this.
Hello?
Hi, good morning.
Hi, morning, Ms. Bharat.
What's up?
Yeah, what's happening? This is a competition that never happened. Darian Johnson is my name.
Let me play that again for anybody who ain't catch it.
Hello?
Hi, good morning.
Hi, morning, Ms. Bharat.
What's up?
Yeah, what's happening? This This is a conversation that never happened. Darian Johnson is my name.
I have 8 taped conversations between myself and the gentleman on that call. And you're going to be quite intrigued by some of the things that was revealed to me. Of course, it's not me alone that have the conversations. I've made sure that a range of persons have the conversation. So if I can't play the conversations for all you, somebody else could play the conversations for all you, right? But this is to let Kamla Prasad be Sesano. You want to call my name in the People Parliament? You want to talk about Newsauce and what Newsauce could do and can't do, and if Newsauce is a reputable media house or not a reputable media house? The thing now start to get sticky. It now start to get sticky. So, you all have yourselves a good evening. And I am going to take a little bit of downtime.